Hey, remember that time when Jesus was telling the Pharisees that he's divine and they were all accusing him of blasphemy for saying he's equal with God? And Jesus was like, I'm a God and all, guys, but like, you know what it says in the Bible, ye are God. So like, what are you mad about, bro? It's like, I'm a God, but so are you, bro. I'm a God, you're a God, everybody's a God. God, old MacDonald had a God. We are all gods. What are you complaining about, bro? You're a God, I'm a God. We're all gods around here. What's the problem? I said I'm divine, but I'm saying you're divine too. I'm a God, you're a God. Let's all have a God party now, gods. Hey, you can't accuse me of blasphemy. We're all gods here. Are you sure about that? Is that the right interpretation? I don't think so.
In the Elohim here is plural. And you say, well, maybe that's the Trinity. Wrong, because if you go down and look at the verse, the capital G Elohim, who is leading the council meeting, is excoriating the other Elohim for their corruption. Okay, we're not talking about the Trinity here. That would be extraordinarily bad theology. Briefly address the issues in Psalm 82. So let's go out there. And in the very first verse, again, my view is real simple. The psalm actually means what it says. He doesn't say, I'm just like you. You get to call yourself sons of God too. He's saying, he doesn't Psalm 82 tell you that there are other sons of God who are more than men? Now, there's a little bit more here. The day of the Lord. I think spiritual warfare always comes up, in this discussion because you've got these entities over the nations and whatnot. And so people bring up the term spiritual warfare. And what spiritual warfare really is, there's an already element to it and there's a not yet. The not yet is an eschatological judgment that Psalm 82 describes. So what Psalm 82 describes is actually echoed in other passages. Remember, I said you're gods, all of you, but you're going to die like men. And then the psalmist says, rise up, O Lord, and take back the nations. Judge those gods and take back the nations. Okay. We've got here Isaiah 34, 1 through 4. Let's go to that, and then we'll go to the other one. So Isaiah 34, this is the judgment of the nations. Draw near, O nations, to hear, and give attention, O peoples. Let the earth hear, and all that fills it, the world and all that comes from it. For the Lord is enraged against all the nations and fierce against their host. He has devoted them to destruction, which is the conquest word, karam. He has given them over for slaughter. Their slain shall be cast out, the stench of their corpses shall rise, the mountains shall flow with their blood. All the host of heaven shall rot away, and the skies roll up like a scroll. All their host shall fall as leaves fall from the vine, like leaves falling from the fig tree. Now, I'm not going to run the search here, but you see the phrase, their host, in verse 4, and their host in verse 2. Every time in the Hebrew Bible where tzavah is suffixed with the third plural suffix, their host, it refers to supernatural beings. It never refers to humans, which is kind of an interesting observation. Again, it's just sort of a trivia point here. But the point of Isaiah 34, 1 through 4 is that both the earthly nations and the heavenly host behind them are judged at the day of the Lord, both of them. And that would make sense because they're intertwined together in Old Testament thought. Isaiah 24, 21. On that day, which is a stock description for the day of the Lord. Again, you could look that up and see that. On that day, the Lord will punish the host of heaven in heaven, the spiritual beings in the spiritual world, and the kings of the earth on the earth. They will be gathered together as prisoners in a pit. They'll be shut up in a prison. After many days, they will be punished. Then the moon shall be confounded, the sun ashamed. The Lord of hosts reigns on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. Did you know that Yahweh has elders? Who might they be? Again, they're the sons of God, the ones that are loyal. It's the council. The council approving of the day of the Lord. Again, these ideas, again, are interrelated. But I want to show you something in the New Testament that picks up on this language. This is the not yet, judgment of the gods. This is Paul's discussion of the resurrection and the resurrection body. And in verse 24, he's talking about the things that are going to unfold at the end of days. Then comes the end, when he delivers the kingdom to God the Father after destroying every rule, every authority, and every power. Now, if we actually looked at this terminology, rule is arche. It's the same word for the rulers elsewhere. Okay, authority, exousia, same rule, that's in other passages, the principalities and powers, the rulers and authorities, and their power, principalities and powers. It's the same word. It's just, all three of these terms are the same terms that Paul uses in passages that describe the judgment of supernatural beings. Okay, passages like, let's go to Ephesians 1:20. We'll just riff on this a little bit. Okay, so Paul, again, talking about the work of Christ, according to the working of his great might that he worked in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion. Why does Paul connect the resurrection with the defeat of the rulers, the authorities, and the powers? Just hold that question in your head. Colossians 2:13. You who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all our trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross, and he disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. See, in the now part of the fulfillment of Psalm 82, the authority, the legitimacy of the rule of the principalities and powers, these spiritual powers of darkness over the nations, that has been withdrawn and nullified. The Most High was the one that set this up. Yes, there was a rebellion. Yes, it goes bad. But he's the one that, this was his judgment back at Babel. So, there it is. And God's saying, look, I wanted Israel to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And I promised Abraham that one of their seed, someone from the seed of Abraham would come, and it would be through his seed that all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Well, Paul in Galatians 3 and Galatians 6 tells us that seed was Christ. And so this is the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant in the now. That it's through the resurrection, through the work of Jesus, that the legal demands, again, the authority of the rulers and the authorities, again, over the nations has been nullified and withdrawn. They have every right to turn from their gods and come back home. 1 Peter 3 says the same thing. Again, it connects it with baptism and the resurrection and all this stuff. There are half a dozen places where Paul connects the work of Christ with the demise of the authority of the gods over the nations. So we have an already judgment, and that works its way out in the gospel. And we have a not yet judgment, that's the eschatology, Isaiah 34, Isaiah 24. These passages, like 1 Corinthians 15 says, just go back there because it plays off those Isaiah passages. Then comes the end when he delivers the kingdom to God the Father after destroying every ruler, every authority, and every power. Okay, he's actually the agent of destruction, which makes great sense because when Jesus does quote Psalm 82 in John 10, he has 2 points to make. He says, look, fellas, I've said I and my Father are one. Doesn't your own scripture say, doesn't it mention that there are other sons of God who are more than mortal? That's his point. He doesn't say, I'm just like you. You get to call yourself sons of God too. He's saying, hey, doesn't Psalm 82 tell you that there are other sons of God who are more than men? And That's point number one. So I can take this title and claim that I'm more than a man. But just so that we're clear exactly what my status is in the council, verses 37, 38, the Father is in me, and I am in the Father. Are we clear now? Okay, I am Lord of the council. Jesus is the one who, essentially, he is the one who acts out the judgment that God renders in Psalm 82 over the principalities and powers, both now in his death and resurrection, and then when the end shall come, the day of the Lord. Again, this is book of Revelation, the Armageddon image, all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's consistent. These passages are consistent. They are not disparate.
Forget everything you thought you knew about bone health. This vibrating exercise surface is rewriting the rules, and here's why.
Elohim here is plural, and you say, well, maybe that's the Trinity. Wrong, because if you go down and look.
So this is explaining Jesus' use of Psalm 82 and John 10. He's not saying, we're all gods around here. What are you complaining about? No. When he says, it says in your law, ye are gods, that's an excerpt from a quote of a passage. It's a snippet of a passage that they're familiar with that he's referring them to. He's not saying you guys are gods.
Look at the verse. The capital G Elohim, who is leading the council meeting, is excoriating the other Elohim for their corruption. Okay, we're not talking about the Trinity here. That would be extraordinarily bad theology. Briefly address the issues in Psalm 82. So let's go out there. And in the very first verse, again, my view is real simple. The psalm actually means what it says. Okay, it doesn't really get any more complicated than that. So let's talk briefly about what it says and, again, why we get certain objections to it. But if you've done the reading, again, you have more detail there. But the first verse, God has taken his place in the divine council. I'm going to click on God, and you'll notice, let's see if I can do this correctly again. I'm playing without a net a little bit. There we go. Here we have Psalm 82, verse 1. God has taken his place in the divine council. And right over here, we have Elohim right there. You notice the blue. So we've got Elohim has taken his place in the divine council. Okay. Elohim Nitzav Ba'adat El in Hebrew. And then the second line is in the midst of the gods. Let's click on gods again. And you will notice, if I do this correctly, hey, we did it again. You will notice that this gods right here is also Elohim, right there. So we've got Elohim 2 times in the same verse. The first occurrence is capital G-O-D, singular. Why? Because if we click on taken his place, nitzav, if we hover over that, that is a singular participle, singular, grammatically singular. So Elohim, even though the shape of the word, the morphology of the word is plural, Elohim is a plural word, it's paired with a singular noun, which tells you how to translate it. Semantically, it refers to one deity, capital G-O-D. Now, we have words like this in English that don't mean anything. Even though they look plural, they may not be plural. Fish, deer. You don't know if I mean one or more than one until I put it into a sentence. Okay, the fish is swimming, the fish are swimming. One is singular, the other is plural. That's grammar. Hebrew's the same way, and Elohim is again a classic illustration of this. So Elohim here with a singular verb, one deity. But the next line, in the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. In the midst of the Elohim, you can't be in the midst of just one. It has to be a group. Elohim here is plural. And you say, well, maybe that's the Trinity. Wrong, because if you go down and look at the verses 2 through 5, the capital G Elohim who is leading the council meeting is excoriating the other Elohim for their corruption and their wickedness and their injustice. Okay, we're not talking about the Trinity here. That would be extraordinarily bad theology. But what typically happens, let me flip back to the slide, is that there are a number of people who would say, well, these are people. The gods here are just people, Mike, silly Mike, move along, citizen, there's nothing to see here. Again, that is a deeply flawed idea. These are not Israelite judges. They're not Israelite magistrates or rulers. Okay, and they're not idols. Well, how do we know, Mike? Well, let's take the easy one first. Okay, God does not have idols in his employ. Okay, idols are not members of God's council. Idols, let's go down to verse 6. Turn that off for a bit. God speaking to the members of the council, I said, you, again, let's just turn this back on so that we can get this here. You'll notice if we hover over you down here in the corner, that is a plural pronoun. So you, plural, are Elohim, gods, right there it is again. You, plural, are Elohim, sons, plural, of the Most High. Now we know who the Most High is. That would be God. Okay, the God of the Bible. So these Elohim are sons of God, and there's a group of them. There's a bunch of them. Okay, the sons of God in no other passage in the Bible are idols, pieces of wood and stone. But the real kicker is when we go over to Psalm 89. Here's where it becomes totally comical and absurd to think this way. Okay, Psalm 89, verses 5 through 7. Let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. So there we have council language, assembly. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? A God greatly to be feared in the council of his holy ones. Now, number 2 here, it says Hebrew sons of God. Okay, it's B'nai Elim in Hebrew, sons of God. Doesn't mean sons of might, it means sons of God. B'nai Elim. It's the same, it's the equivalent to Psalm 82, verses 6, sons of the Most High. It's equivalent to sons of God in Job 1:6, Job 2:1, okay, Genesis 6:2. I mean, sons of God, this phrase, B'nai Elim, B'nai Elohim, B'nai Ha-Elohim, Job 38 is another one. All of these references refer to members of the heavenly host. Okay, it's as simple as concording them and looking them up. There are no idols ruling from the skies in a council. There are no Jewish elders ruling from the skies or in the skies in a council. Okay, this is patently absurd, and yet you will see this a lot in the academic discussion. Now, if you do the reading for the class, you look at the footnotes, some of the optional reading. I've done, peer-reviewed scholarly papers on this, conference papers. You get the information. I'm going to move on here. I'm not going to spend the whole time on this. But Psalm 89 is really the death blow to the human view of Psalm 82 and the human view of a divine council. There are no Jewish, in Old Testament history, you never have Jewish elders assigned to rule the nations. Let's just go back from the skies, because look at the way Psalm 82 ends. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. Well, where do we get that? I thought God was king of the world. Like, what do you mean inherit the nations? It's language that goes back to Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, the Babel event, where God divorced the nations. Israel was his inheritance, and he makes a covenant with Abram, with Israel, to bless the other nations. And again, the whole kingdom of priests idea, bringing the nations back into the fold. We're going to see a little bit more about that, not only in this session, but sessions that follow, how the gospel is the fulfillment, the already and the not yet, of this vision that God will one day judge the gods of the nations and inherit all the nations back.
So to my Adventist friends that watch this, if you have any questions about this, ask me. Michael Heiser is not a Seventh-day Adventist, and a lot of people misunderstand what's being said in this information. But let me just tell you right now, this cutting edge research as of a few years ago, this is very much coherent and backs up the great controversy worldview and the idea, even the notion of an investigative judgment, that God is demonstrating something before this council, his heavenly council. This fits our worldview, and he has no intention of backing up what we think, our theology. But it's very insightful and very exciting to me anyway, if you understand it. But if you're confused about something, drop your concerns and questions in the comment section. If there's something you're not getting, so one of the main problems people have is this Elohim thing. It says Elohim singular amongst the Elohim is what you need to understand. And a lot of Adventists don't get this. Go online and pester John Peckham about it, the theological and philosophical chair at Andrews University, and he'll back me up on that, I'm pretty sure. Elohim means divine being. It's not a name of God. It just means divine being. And the theology of the Bible talks about God is the true Elohim. But the Bible in the original language uses Elohim as a language of just divine beings. So the Bible in the original language, it talks about Elohim, even though God alone is the true Elohim. That's why he's the Most High. So the theology of the Bible has one God, creator God. But the word Elohim is not used that way. It's only speaking of the one true God, even though the theology says that. So it's not a problem. If you pretend like it's a problem, and then you get honest with the way the text uses the language, you'll find that unsustainable, but it's not a concern. Okay? God is Elohim, the true Elohim, the true divine being, the creator God. But the word Elohim the language isn't super strict like you might have been told or thought. But it's not a problem. So anyways, if you have any questions, let me know. It's actually really exciting once you come to understand the way the Bible is using the language and what it's actually saying and teaching.